Hi and welcome back. So this is, for now at least, the last of my design journey from Staedtler reviews. This is the last product I got lying around that I want to review. So a year ago I bought the double-ended or the twin tip pens, and these are water based but not necessarily water soluble. Well, they are water soluble, but a lot of them will, the pigments or the dye will split into color chromatography. So if you take like a purple or a green, you might have the colors separate into the components they're mixed of. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's what happens, and they don't dissolve super well. They're not meant to be used as watercolor. I thought so, but I was mistaken, because they have two different ones, and these are the watercolor ones, and this is watercolor brush pens. The markers themselves, they look a lot the same, at least from the outside. Fortunately, the ones that's made for watercolor has a dark barrel and the others are light, so if you use both and you get them mixed up, you can sort them out again. The big difference is in the nibs. Better keep track of which has a forward pen. So this is just the ordinary ones, and it has a bullet nib in one end and another type of bullet nib in the other. And this one is the brush pen, and it actually has a kind of a brush pen in both ends. Neither is very soft, so they're not good for calligraphy, but it also doesn't say calligraphy on here. They have a set specifically made for calligraphy, so if you want to do that, take that set, because these are a little too firm for that. And as I was getting this, I got it at the same time where I got the watercolor crayons, and if you saw that video, I talked about the battle between my adult self, my wallet, and my inner child, and the compromise was that I got the two smaller sets. So I got the 12 watercolor crayons, and I got the 18 set of these. This set comes in two sizes, or the series comes in two sizes. There's 18 and 36, and so I got the 18 of these and the 12 of the crayons. Now these are meant for watercolor, so it doesn't really matter too much to me that there's not 36 colors. 18 is a lot. Yeah, and I quite like them. And I had played around with them, so let's try them out on paper. So I'm not gonna do a realism drawing today for tests. I'm a little fed up with realism because it takes a little bit of my creativity away, because I have to find a reference photo that fits the colors and has a size and stuff that fits the format of the video and how long it will take me to do and stuff. So I'm just gonna do some doodles, or as some call it, intuition drawing with these. Let's just play around. So let's get a hold of them, slide them out so we can grab them. This is fairly sturdy plastic, so it should be fine to keep them in there, which I like. So I'll start with something light, a yellow. So there's this tip, and that's kind of like a bullet tip. It is firm, it is not really a brush tip. And it gives off quite fine lines. There's not so much, you have to tip it very much to get a little bit of line variation, but it's really meant for fine lines. Great choice, can't see it. And here's the brush nib. Gives a broader line, but can also, if you're more light-handed, gives thinner lines. But it's not so flexible that it easily gives the line variation that people want when they do calligraphy. So for that, it's not really fantastic. And so here's an orange. And that's the brush nib end I'm using. And I picked a watercolor paper that has fairly much sizing on it, so they should paint out quite okay on this when we get to that part. And I just filled up a couple of brush pens, water brush pens, because I like that with these. So they dissolve quite nicely. You can even let them dry a little bit and they're still fairly reactivatable. Now, how well they flow out much depends on the paper you use. You really need a cellulose paper and with a good deal of sizing in it. The sizing prevents the dye to sink into the paper fibers. If you have absorbent paper for this type of pens, you will find that the dye just sinks into the paper fibers and you can't activate the watercolor part of it, not very easily anyways, and you leave scribble lines in there. So that paper has a lot to say as well. So that's the red, and if you just go over them easy with one stroke like this, you can leave lines in there. They will flow out a bit, but you can have lines left behind if you like. The more you work them, the more they dissolve and flow out. So yeah, and here's pink. You can also just use them as regular markers, and they work fine for that. You might be finding yourself a little short of pale colors because they are full saturated colors here. So they're meant, if you want to have paler colors, you have to activate them and thin them out with water. And yeah, a little goes a fairly long way. Now that is wet, so let's try and put some lines in when it's wet. And they just bleed out, and how much they bleed depends on the paper, I'd say. So you can really do different kinds of effects with these depending on how you use them, and I find them quite nice. And these ones, unlike some of the other watercolor pens I have, these have not caused the paper to pill. Maybe it's because I've gotten smarter with what paper I use, or they're just better. I haven't quite figured that part out yet, but I quite enjoy them and I like the colors. that come in this set. They're quite nice. And you can blend them and mix them as you see fit. So that's one color. Let's try another purple color for the rest of that area. Oh, I like the brushed nib end best for this. This will not be very pretty because it's usually not nice to put all the colors in a set in the same piece. Kind of get a little confusing to look at, but hey, it's for the demo. I'll continue this and show you the colors that are here in here, but let's just make it a time lapse. So, all done, all trimmed up. This was really fun. The paper didn't pill, so shout out to Canson Aquarelle watercolor paper, 300 GSM. It's not too absorbent, and the surface is sturdy enough for the abuse. There was a couple of places where I had layered too much up, and I could start to feel that the paper felt soft under the tip, so I just left it alone and let it dry. But overall, paper held up, and the colors just worked brilliant on this paper. And I tried out all kinds of different techniques and stuff. And the fine nib on there is not a brush nib. It's actually quite firm, and it gives off really good and precise fine lines when you need them, or tiny dots. And yeah, it was fun, and it was for once quite relaxing for me, because yeah, so some things didn't really turn out maybe the way I planned it, but hey, it's not something in particular. It's a doodle, or whatever you prefer to call it. It's abstract. It's whatever it decides to be as you're working. Yeah, it can bleed in together, and that's, I think it was this part, I used way too much water somewhere. I squeezed the pencil too hard, and it gave up too much water, and I just pulled the color all over the place, and it worked fine. It didn't make back runs. Reviews like this is a little difficult, because part of it is the paper and part of it is the pens. But I say with most of my other watercolor markers and pens, I have had problems with the paper pilling when we're trying to do multiple layers. If that's the paper, if it's the marker, I'm now not sure about, but I didn't have that problem today. So I'm super happy with these. I didn't miss any colors in here, and they seem to mix brilliantly. The set is well matched up, so the mixtures of them seem to come out quite nice. So yeah, the Equaline brush for the black background, and that was not because I didn't want to use the other one, and yes, it was because it's not a very big nib on that, so big areas that has to be this dark, I definitely thought the Equaline would be fitting for that, and it was. So there's a good cousin there, and I'm definitely gonna use the two together, because if I should say anything negative, and you can't have everything in one pen, this is not good for large areas, but then again, these are not good for details. But together, they're brilliant. So yeah, design journey, I have reviewed, oh my god, 6 products I think by now, and they all been really nice to work with. So you really, I don't think you can go wrong buying that Staedtler design journey. It's not the cheapest stuff you can find, but it's very durable, and it's really quite good. Okay, I noticed that absolutely by accident I cut this the same width as the package, so I wonder if I can stick it in there. Yeah, just sidetracking. So, could be cool to have my personal. I would need a little bit more. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and come back. My next project will be absolutely something similar to this, because that was just way too fun not to do again. But then I will try and do it as a mixed media project. Bye!